Oh, I think you might want to use the restroom.
That was like your podcast, all right. I mean, it's probably how you normally say all right, but it makes me think of your podcast. All right.
All right, everybody.
Is Peak Sloth like your podcast network, or is it somebody else? It's a real podcast network?
It is as much as any podcast network is real, which, surprise, no one can stop you from starting a podcast network.
That's kind of what I meant, I guess. Like, you guys have distributed the podcast.
Peaksloth.com is real, and we're one of 6 podcasts on there, I think. And yeah, it was started by a buddy of mine just before he moved to LA, and I helped him set up the website and like get it all together. But we don't have like ads or anything. Like, we have no income stream. It just helps to have a way to cross promote each other, basically. It's like if you people who like this podcast also like this podcast.
That's the trick, right? Get a podcast that actually makes money, or a podcast network.
Yeah, that is the trick, but it's usually pretty upsetting. But I try not to worry about it. Just do podcasts for fun on time that I have to throw away.
All right. There's a lot of Twit stuff, and obviously he makes.
Oh yeah, yeah. Leo has figured it out.
I actually found out about this.
Really? Oh, nice. From Twig?
Are there 2 Z's in your last name?
Yeah.
Yeah, Kevin Marks on it.
Yep.
You got it.
Yeah,
Yep.
he's great.
You know, it's the
Nice.
a week and a half.
That is really cool to know. Yeah, Kevin.
I wish when he announced New York, we had as many people.
I know. We did one in New York. When was that? September?
It was the weekend of October 1st.
October.
It was 30. It was the 30th and the 1st.
Yeah, and that was not super well attended, but we had a good time.
That disappoints me.
What's your name again?
It's
Sorry,
tough. We didn't advertise it very well.
Adam.
Yeah.
We had basically a venue and a date and not enough organizers, so we didn't actually get to advertising it until 3 weeks out maybe.
And I usually organize, but I could only be there for one of the 2 days. So.
Good. Taking some of the pressure off me, Gregor.
Oh, are you a note taker?
I was having to take notes like the last 3 seconds.
Delete.
You're taking notes? Get it out of here. Looks like Chris is chiming in as well.
Yeah, he's pretty good on additional
Kevin
notes.
Green.
Yeah. Buffalo Saco.
All right. So the idea for this that kind of had was based on some of the discussions that Marty and I had over the last just couple months. It's been emerging as a theme of at our homebrew website club here. We have a lot of people come who are.
Sorry, it's no taking conflicts.
Oh, all right. Who are interested in coming, maybe somewhat familiar with IndieWeb, but often it's more of I'm interested in having a web page. That's like a very first step. So what I wanted to think about is just from a perspective of very beginner activities, how can we take some of those needs, chunk them into like maybe 1 hour sessions as activities that we could then have at homebrew website clubs of, okay, this homebrew website club for the first hour from 6:30 to 7:30. If you don't even have a domain, here's how you can get a domain as your first step, or here's how you can tackle hosting. And then from there, have like, if you have WordPress, here's how you can install WordPress plugins. Here's what they do. So like just brainstorming those types of things. And then one possible idea that I wanted to maybe work on is if we can narrow down some high impact activities that could help engage people, a wider audience, just even creating some of those as resources, with the idea being they could be repeated by other homebrew website clubs, other people, to just help build that engagement and interest for starting points for beginners. So I wanted to open that up, and it's like, have you come across anything? Is there some that we've observed are hosting and domains is a first step that can be very intimidating, that sometimes if you had that, you take for granted that that's not something that other people may know how to even do as a process. So just like maybe looking at like those bigger picture themes and then like narrowing that down into activities. So
here's a good question immediately from the chat. Chris Aldridge, I think it's him. Chris Aldridge asks, has everyone at the current camp managed to get themselves logged into the wiki? So which would require having your own domain and having it set up with like RealMeOff. And also asks, I think as a favor, if you haven't, could you do it and then get into the chat?
Oh, yeah.
Not just you, just like as a general.
Yeah.
But it is a good check-in. So like, are there folks that have not been able to log into the wiki? Handful. Anybody?
I have not.
I did not try, and being super honest, I did not know why I needed to, so I did not bother.
Cool. Good to know.
Is there a reason I need to?
So you can add yourself to the community.
But I don't want to be known. I'm a lurker.
You log
There
off
has to
your
be a
website.
reason.
So
No, I actually don't have a
You didn't say that
website,
it's a
so yeah,
resource.
I wouldn't be able to.
exactly.
Exactly.
So like that's a good
You
good
cannot
example
sign
of
into the
that.
wiki yet.
Anyway, that's an interesting one, and I would say that is one that in the IndieWeb community we push people towards a lot as a first goal, which is like get your domain, get your homepage set up, and set it up enough that you can use like RealMeOff to log into the wiki. And to try and answer Amy's question, it feels kind of less important when you're at an event and like the community's in front of you, or if you're part of a regular homebrew website club meetup, because you're engaging with those folks. But I think it's especially important for people that are like engaging with the community online primarily, or for the first time, or they want to continue those discussions outside of the event. Like the IndieWeb really does happen in chat and on the wiki, and by signing yourself into the wiki, you can add yourself to all of these little different features that do clue you in on the chat. So we have a page called IRC People, where you can tie your chat nickname to your webpage, and it makes a nice little face and avatar. I think after that, is this still true, Aaron? Chat.indieweb.org. You can. It will recognize you from there.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Soon you will use your own domain to log into the chat without needing an IRC client or Slack, which is maybe an incentive. I don't know. Seems neat. But that's like one reason that's often a target. Sorry.
No worries. On the web sign-in page, I was looking to see we usually have why sections on each page, like why do this. Using your own domain is safer than a third-party email service and simpler than email on your own domain. And like, yeah, getting on the wiki is kind of like basically, if you can sign in there, then you can sign into a bunch of other services too. So even if you don't care to use the wiki or ever edit it, if you can log into the wiki, then we know you can log into all these other services too.
Yeah, I think that, like that's one of the things that was kind of going back and forth on a little. It's like the wiki, like when Marty first was introducing Homebrew Website Club and IndieWeb, it's like he sent me the wiki, and it's like that's an amazing wealth of knowledge. But like so what I'm noticing though is like some attendees or some people in general are just like our staff or friends they're not even at that point, and it's like, do we need a bridge to help people get from like, hey, I'm interested, I need some like easy wins or easy setups, to then like there's more engagement and like motivation and ownership to even then like go to the wiki. So like that's kind of like where I'm thinking a little bit. It's like, well, what can we or I or whoever contribute to help that process? Because the wiki is fantastic. Like as soon as I felt confident to be able to jump into that, I was like, oh, this has literally every answer I need. But if I'm not aware of it
doesn't, please add it.
Yeah. So that's kind of what I'm thinking is like that point right there.
Well, one mistake I've seen people do is there are some lower end domain registrars that give you a free domain, which really isn't yours. If you look into the fine print, they'll give you the free domain, but they own the domain.
Yep.
And for all intents and purposes, it looks just fine
Yep.
until you want to move it or do something else. And then, if you've been using that for a year, you're stuck.
Right.
If you used your name,
Mhm.
they now own that, and
Yeah.
you have to pay to get it back or
Absolutely.
do something else.
We had a perfect example of that with one of my coworkers who came to our event. She has a really cool domain that it's a .art domain she had through Micah, the local art school. And what Marty and I were doing a little bit of digging for it because she wanted to reclaim that and then own the site herself because it was connected through a whole maze of registrars and services. And it's like that. She was excited. She came to the one or two of our meetups, was excited, but then that was a stumbling block because the name she wanted was then connected to all of this stuff that she then had to fight to try to figure out. And that kind of whittled away at the initial excitement, I think, of oh, I don't really own my domain that's my name. Yeah.
Have we heard any follow-ups?
I checked in with her a couple of times, and it's I think that's what I'm thinking is there a clear activity where it's we're gonna here's some good recommended domain registration service places to go that if you do it here, you own your domain, just as not to actually help with that issue particularly, but to avoid it.
Yeah, sorry, I was
future.
asking. I was curious if you had heard if she gotten her domain back.
No, she hasn't. Just because it was you remember that was extremely complex. It was really strange.
Well, it was hard to figure out where it was registered and to who. And
Yeah.
I guess right. We guessed that it was still owned by the university.
And I think it was, but then she couldn't contact anybody to because it was in limbo because she had graduated. So and it wouldn't be a big deal if it wasn't the name that she wanted. So, and even then, it was just we did a couple of lookups and couldn't figure out somebody for her to contact easily. So, just trying to and I was thinking an activity that would kind of not fix that specific issue, but a getting started activity is here's how you can use hover or Namecheap or whatever and go through, get your name, what that means, and then that goes into identity, what we had talked about with that. It's that's a first step that's important.
Yeah. And Chris in the notes also recommends that along with recommended services, we try and keep a list of, if we know them, who are these free providers to watch out for, and just be aware that that's not the result you think it is.
Don't use GoDaddy.
For example,
No matter what, don't use GoDaddy.
We recommend GoDaddy a lot in the wiki, and it makes me want to take it out.
They also
Maybe
I
a
always
little
heard good things
politic.
about Hover.
they host our
Yeah, I used
or hosted.
They've hosted a couple of San Francisco.
Mm.
Yeah, it's
But they're not-
it's a tricky thing.
They're not an example of the free domains that you're talking about,
Correct.
are they?
I
Okay.
just don't like their business practices.
Yeah, I agree.
When in Darius, we've had because you have WordPress.com and you've come to a bunch. We've tried to fix get you off that and even move that to just a .org or something. And we ran into some issues with that too. But that's when we started thinking about structuring to have, instead of just the discussion time being or the quiet writing time being open, okay, we would dedicate a session to, because there's probably other people in that situation. You mentioned it earlier. It's what do you do if you want to migrate? How do you do that? So I thought that could be a session, a 1 hour activity or whatever that we would advertise or put out there on the meetups. Yeah.
So would we consider that a contained activity, is understanding why a domain is important to having an online identity, and then things to do, and then a list of we know you might have heard of this but don't.
Right. Yeah. Would that be helpful? Do we think that would be helpful as an activity an isolate or that could be offered or done? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that kind of information is already on the IndieWeb wiki, but it's going to be scattered among things
Right. Just
Well, and I think there's a lot of value to also just making an event out of it.
Right.
Yes,
This is
definitely.
the get a domain name meetup.
Yeah,
Of Umbros,
exactly. Because the information is out there and it's great, but it's just kind of streamlining it in such a way it could be done less than an hour. As this is the activity or the event itself.
So sort of let's step back a minute, and sort of meta discussion that we're talking about is the concept of packaging up specific activities into a, I guess, kind of like developing a curriculum is what we're talking about, right? And one of those things is get a domain name, get on the web, have something. I had a good time with the little micropub thing intro in the morning, where like we built a micropub server from scratch in under an hour, and I actually want to turn that into a little video that we can just put online. But that would also be another really good, obviously a bit more advanced, but an example of another like self-contained session where I would be totally comfortable after a couple of iterations of this, like being like, hey, this homebrew website club, we're going to your first steps in micropub, and then like this is the plan for the evening. I think we could do some of that for a lot of these other concepts of starting with domain name, and then like the next one is there's like WordPress is a good example. Like let's install WordPress and get a blog up, and we can do that in an hour. And then another one would be like, let's add microformats to your site. But I like the idea of turning these things into little self-contained chunks of a plan for a meetup, and then if you're doing that here, I would want to like take a look at that and replicate it in Portland and do that for the Portland number.
Absolutely, like that's kind of like what we were thinking of. Like, there's a lot of our staff have used WordPress here, just as like they're comfortable with at least just like posting content and like a little bit of like the dashboard. So that seems like a good or logical first step. But then that unpacked a whole bunch of other questions of like, okay, well, how do I install WordPress? How do I sign up for it? How do I get my domain connected to it? How do I get hosting? Like all of those, that could be like things in like a pathway or something that ultimately would lead to with the great IndieWeb plugin. I mean, they're fantastic, but it's like you use a bunch of smaller activities to get to that point. Yeah.
A recognized charity, 501c3 or anything like that?
No, not yet.
I was thinking if you are, or maybe even if you're not, you might be able to reach out to some of these hosts and domain registrars and all this kind of stuff and see if they'll, if people
What
come
about
through your
DreamHost? They're
organization.
sponsored.
A lot of them are willing to offer deals, especially on first-year registrations, but it's often the barrier for people.
I don't think it is either.
And I'm also wary of giving out discounts on the first-year registration because it sets the expectation wrong, that you're not paying for it when the next year you're going to have to pay it. And I don't like setting the expectation that this is a free thing. Because it's not accurate.
The one that I see people run into is you get your domain, now where do you host it?
Yep, exactly.
And now that I'm paying a host, what do I do? Oh, you just have to FTP some things up. And as soon as you say stuff like that, people are like,
right.
What? Yeah. Or even like knowing where to look to find the
PuTTY? What are you
information.
talking about?
Yeah, because like that's, like that there is so much out there that it can be overwhelming too. It's like, okay, well, I even know I need to get hosting. It's like, where do I look? Some hosts are probably better than others as far as like, we know that. I mean, like that, like that's a perfect example. It's like, all right, domain, now what? Like, now what do I do? Yeah.
So yeah, I heard something in there, like maybe there could be lessons around common stumbling blocks that are kind of like demystifying the web. So like I think most people get like choosing a good domain can be important. Knowing the like what the features are that you want is maybe going to be very personal, something we can easily demystify. And so like that's one block. But then maybe even before that, we need to give them the whole roadmap. So it's like, well, you're going to need a domain, then you're going to need something to serve your content, whatever that is. And before that, you probably should know what are the kinds of content, and like how do there. So like if you throw up a WordPress site, like that's going to mean a certain set of maintenance tasks, and maintenance tasks going forward a lot of interactivity out of the box. Whereas like something like setting up a GitHub Pages thing is like a static site that you can bam in an afternoon have a site, but it can't do anything other than that maintenance going forward.
And I was going to mention source control next because I've probably been doing this for a little bit longer than y'all, but when you FTP a new file up and you didn't take a backup of your old one and it's wrong,
it's bad
that's
taste. Yeah.
But having some kind of source control or version control is, and if you can get people started on that to start with, then it's not such a big deal.
Right.
If you try to introduce version control into their flow, you know,
with a lot of other stuff, it's like it's like segmenting it out, right? Like how
and if
can
you
we
do it
that?
right, if you do it right, you can eliminate a lot of other things like uploading stuff to your host. You can set up a pipeline from GitHub to the host. So you upload stuff to GitHub, and the rest of it just happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another thing, like kind of linked to that is just like what like. Even understanding like, do I need WordPress or can I just use a static site? Like for starting, like, do I just need a static site to get your identity out there and like link it? Like maybe that could be like another option as like a totally different route or path of activities. Yeah. Yeah. It definitely sounds like this is something that's like high impact for hopefully or like extending this or to a wider audience. Yeah.
An important distinction too is the idea of understanding how the web works, which to me is, understanding domain name registration and hosting, and then separating that from the IndieWeb. Because I think these things are different, and I think we are getting into a zone where we're kind of using them interchangeably. And they're all important, right? So I think it's kind of, when you're talking about IndieWeb, it's maybe like, is it lower or uppercase? IWC is a way to distinguish, which is like own your own site, very, very specific. And in terms of onboarding and thinking about the generations of people, I think it makes sense to be like, yeah, have your site, here are the things. And then after you have them excited about it, and they're like, well, what am I going to use this site for? Then you can introduce them to capitalized IWC. It's like, okay, now you have, how do you do IndieAuth? How do you use the wiki? How does this become the place? And so you can empower, like you get them hooked with this thing where they're vaguely like, yeah, I want to have a website. I want to learn about the web. I don't know, maybe I'll get a job in it too. Okay, I'm going to be doing these like much more sophisticated things, and I can now imagine myself not being on Facebook as much.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's too much to just be like, well, be on the wiki, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that's very confusing.
I think that's a really good point, because it's like sometimes I think like a lot of people I've explained it to, like conceptually or philosophically, are like, yeah, the IndieWeb concepts are great, they make a lot of sense, but then it's like they don't even have a web presence to begin with, so it's still very abstract. Like even if they think the philosophy is awesome, it's like they don't even have a place to put content. Like, I think that's a really good point.
This fits in. Chris Aldrich is typing right now in the notes. He says a lot of people are coming in and wanting to replace their existing presence on Facebook or Twitter. So can we offer a package that's like, build a website that replaces your Twitter, or like make a website that replaces how you use Facebook? And obviously that's not going to like, it's, there's going to be a big step where it's like, now get your friends to all do it too.
Right.
But
well, I mean, that's the whole idea behind Posse and using Bridgie to get the comments back, is that you can do both. Like you can actually have both.
Yeah, you can still have it all.
Yeah.
But I think that would be really fascinating, and maybe a way of diving into like the way people think about the kinds of content that they post and seek out online, and coming at it from that side. So like notes is like the original post type, and a big part of it I think was a response to like everyone is on Twitter now, and that's where everyone's small thoughts are going. And so saying like, okay, tonight we're going to get your website to replace your Twitter would be a pretty cool little module.
It would be really cool.
It's very different depending on what kind of website you want in the end, because it could be anything from request the one of my favorites, Kevin Marks does this, request the dump of your tweets. That becomes an HTML file. Put that HTML file on your website. You have replaced Twitter.
The same thing with Facebook too, right?
Facebook is not nearly as useful.
But it is HTML.
Yeah, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I
guess
guess in theory you could do that. But Twitter's is very nicely like, it's got an index.
The difference though is that with that, it's a one-time snapshot, and then you can't keep writing except on Twitter.
Yeah.
Like you're not going to go and edit the tweet dump HTML to make new posts. Like
Yeah.
So getting to functionally replace your Twitter means making it so that you can actually post stuff to your website on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, and actually maybe that's like two different things. There's like
Yeah.
replacing your Twitter activity with that, like getting a microblog going versus backfeed as like another step of like what are the ways to pull your history into your website and archive that stuff for future.
Yeah, I like that. That's an interesting idea. Like that's like starting with like these modules or like pathway results or whatever based on like a need of like, okay, well, is your need or want or desire to like get rid of your Twitter or replace or augment your Twitter or Facebook activity, and then like there's an approach to get people to that. Like that could be a digestible way to do it too.
Might be worth clarifying that as replace your public Twitter.
Yes.
Because especially if you have a private account, and we don't have a lot of great solutions for that. Yeah,
that's a really good point. Yeah, and like clarifying a lot of that.
Yeah.
Like some of those points that came up in the discussion earlier. Yeah.
I think it's important to call out that a lot of the applications that we're talking about and the tools that are IndieWeb are social. And yet I think a lot of the cases and like that you're talking about, like I want a website, they're thinking about something that's more professional, right? It's maybe something that's more of a portfolio piece. They're thinking of it as the thing that gets them the job or as the opportunity to practice their skills. Whereas a lot of the other tools that we're talking about are much more like get off the silo. And I think just weighing that or acknowledging that I think you might be able to hook a lot more people first of have a professional presence on the web. And then, okay, I think you can then talk about as you're creating content, how are you going to do that and how are you going to be advertising it and building the brand?
Yeah.
But a lot of people, if you're like, own your own Twitter, they're like, well, whatever. Right. So many people have given up on that and just don't care. But the idea of having a professional presence, people are so motivated by LinkedIn, but no, LinkedIn is kind of creepy.
There's the like 2 days ago, or whatever. Was it the blogging network that just shut down their external contributors?
Oh, Huffington Post.
Huffington Post.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Oh, wow.
So all the authors there are about to lose all of their posts.
Wow.
And everyone's like, oh crap. I thought Huffington Post was a thing, but so that's a great example of like that's people's professional work, and
that happened with a paper too. I think it was DNA info or whatever.
and
the Gothamist
and
network of.
Still disappointed about the Gothamist.
So like there's a strong incentive to, as a writer, have your own domain name and put your writing there, and then also copy it to Huffington Post.
Right.
Treat that as a syndication destination.
Right.
Not the
not
source.
the only place that it goes.
Yeah. This thing, it's like maybe there's like the presence aspect, which is the professional, like getting a place to have your professional, like your CV or your about or whatever, and then the content is where it's more social, and then that can be spread outward. So it's like there's two, instead of lumping it all together, it's like, okay, maybe your first step is you create a professional page for yourself, and then you can start putting that content out there. Yeah. I never really thought about that as like when I talk to people, it's like I kind of just lump all that together. But it's two different motivators probably. Yeah.
I mean, as a hobby, a lot of people are interested in publishing content, right? And a lot of them think this is, and motivated because they want to become famous, become rich, whatever else. And so then you can and you can own it and you can license it, and you can control it. I think is it makes sense to a lot of people, right? And they can see why they don't want Facebook to own their really creative ideas. Yeah. They want to be able to sell that business. Everyone's got a podcast, everyone's got channels, right?
They do. Raise your hand if you have a podcast. Raise your hand if you have a YouTube channel that is active.
Define active.
Well, if you signed up for it and there's
posted one video in the last year.
I post a lot more videos to the IndieWebCamp channel than I have ever posted to my own.
Nice to know.
Shouldn't you post them to your own and then cross-post it to
I should. Content creators.
Content creators,
Good question. Although they're all
IndieWebCamp.
IndieWebCamp.
Content creators and think they own it.
Right. Yeah.
There's another note from Chris. So following along with the journalism thing, there is the concept of an author platform where like there is a centralized publishing entity, but they encourage their writers to also publish on their, to like have a presence online and publish on their own site as well as, which is an interesting like professional choice that like that sort of industry is adopting one of the major tenets of the indie web, where it's like, we know that your time with us may be short. And you're a writer with a career, and no online relationship between writer and publisher lasts forever. And so like, I think holding up examples of that make sense to people.
Yeah.
Finding things where it's like, this touches people's real lives, whether they have any idea of what, when you say silo to them, they think grains.
Yeah.
Like that might be an easy way to start like introducing some of these concepts.
Yeah, all I can think of is user stories.
Yeah.
And like content creator, journalists, designer, programmer, because that's a big thing for like, I want to get into programming. I want to understand what people who do this do. I want to get a job.
Yeah.
Community organizers, people who want to advocate for something politically or socially. Because those are all going to be different, like URL that's shared. But like you said about the indie web stuff, it's all very social and publish oriented and in connection. But
So just as a time check, we're at 15.
Okay. Awesome.
it'd be interesting to see what other user scenarios are. Because like as a homebrew website club pitch, it could be, here are 8 different ways of approaching this. What do you associate with? Not necessarily a thing you do in person, like teach 8 classes at one time.
Yeah.
But like preparing as a guide for preparing a curriculum.
Yeah. I like that. And I guess that was going to be one of the questions I had when we were getting close to wrapping up, is like, as far as like tomorrow, this is something I've been wanting to start kind of tackling a little, and we've talked about it a little bit for like, it's the start of 2018. It's like, if we could roll out some of these for homebrew website clubs in the new year. So like, what would be some like high impact places to start, just as far as like a time tomorrow to roll out some of it?
I mean, this isn't applicable to your homebrew website club, or probably any, but I do want to do the micropub intro as a video.
That's awesome.
Because I think that's a very concrete thing that I can actually speak to clearly enough. So I'm going to take that on myself to do that, to make that into a video, which would then also be a good like course outline for someone to do in person. But I would love to see more people doing similar things where like the idea is a 45-minute thing, which you could make a video for, and can also run as a presentation. Around some very specific task, and like make up all the constraints you want. Like you can decide, we're going to use WordPress, and the goal is to be able to post to Twitter only and get the comments back. And like that is the
task. That is the thing.
And then let's make that outline and turn that into a thing. And then it's just like keep doing that for various combinations of concepts and tools and different technologies. Because I think a lot of those would have people interested in the very specific aspect of it. And like, it's totally okay to not try to cover all bases in one go. Like, you don't need to be like, here are the 8 ways you can make a website, right? Like, let's pick one thing, do that, pick another thing, do that. So,
IndieWeb U.
IndieWeb U.
Long before somebody buys that domain.
But yeah, like each thing is like associated with a very specific outcome or a specific task.
So I think that would help with it gives you as organizer of a homebrew website club, it gives you something very concrete to say, we're going to do this. Like, if you're interested in it, there's a concrete thing you're going to get out of it. And some people won't find that interesting. That's fine. They won't come to that part. But like having I think the feedback of having a concrete thing that is accomplished will be good.
Yeah, and I think as more of those exist, like this is just the kind of thing where you could spend forever trying to plan what the right curriculum is
Right.
and never hit there.
Yeah.
And I think the answer is like do a lot of these different things, and then eventually there will be pieces that you'll want to pull. And so it's like, okay, well, 5 minutes of this video, 10 minutes of that video, we have a new thing that solves a different problem.
Yeah.
Chris also says he has a few outlines for creating videos for some one function websites that
Oh,
are similar to
cool.
what you're describing.
That's great. Yeah.
So, yeah, that would be cool.
But yeah, anybody else have any ideas of like things they could not necessarily make a video of, but at least write the like sort of curriculum
Yeah.
for? Because I would love to be able to like walk away with a list of things people would actually start working on.
I have some. Oh, go ahead.
I don't know about curriculum, but I was going to suggest for the hosting and the web service stuff, maybe we could survey like the people who are most familiar with it in the community. Like we have a page on there and we list like who uses it, so we can see how many use it. Maybe like very basic pros and cons, and kind of surface a top few recommendations. You know, like these are probably the easiest for you to register a domain.
Yep.
Would you
Questions like, do you want to? Is it good or bad to have your hosting at the same place as the domain? You know, stuff like that. I don't know.
so turning that into some sort of little presentation thing, or
Well, I was thinking like surveying to collect that data, and then yes, maybe including that in a domain and server thing. Like here's the top X recommendations.
I actually think more important than making a recommendation is documenting the process of how the recommendation is made, so that people can come to their own conclusions. Essentially,
Yeah.
Right.
Definitely
Showing
don't
the
want-
trade-offs.
Yeah. So like, because I mean, yeah, to some extent, someone just wants to know like what should I use right now, but that also will change over time.
Sure.
So it's more like, I use this because it lets me have this flexibility of whatever.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
And documenting that process would I think be a useful presentation or a video or a wiki page of
Like those questions that you would ask, or
questions people will ask coming into like when they're going to go get a domain and put up a website, all the questions people have, and then walking through how they can answer the question instead of just providing an answer.
Oh,
Right?
yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then like that could turn into an evening meetup of we're going to get a domain name and put a web page up, but then the actual what you end up doing that evening is walking through like explaining domain name registration and how that relates to hosting and why you might want it on the same company or in different companies.
Yeah.
Answering all those questions that come up.
Yeah, and some of those are going to be things that like you wouldn't know without experience. So like how usable is someone's DNS system? Like, is it impossible to figure out? Do they hide features? And like, that's super valuable stuff to just tell people like, this is the easiest place to just like boop, 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 an IP address, and there you go.
Yeah.
I have this idea that's been bopping around in my head for a long time about, I wanted to call it Do IndieWeb the Hard Way. And maybe now like manual until it hurts is what I'm thinking of. And the start would be a simple static site. So like get yourself going on GitHub pages, point your domain at it, probably through Cloudflare to get just like HTTPS because I like it. I don't know. And then actually like go through the process of like you're just editing a static site, but it's like now let's make a post, and how do we mark it up? So like each little video is like about this micro format. You know, here's how to make a note. Did we do it? Like, let's keep checking the parsers to see how it works. Let's verify it on somebody else's site. I found a post I want to like, let's do it manually until it hurts. Let's write a like post by hand. And then like do the web mentions. How do we do that? Like, let's go to Telegraph. We got to get this thing done. And just like see what you can do if you are the robot that has to do all the indie web plumbing. Because even if no one would actually follow that day to day, I think like thinking about it in that way definitely helped me understand all of the different pieces as I was putting it together. So I don't know if that's just like something I like because it sounds really stupid, but I do like it.
I think that provides a lot of perspective on what the tools are too. Like that was something like, since I did a little bit of that with when I was working through Hugo, like then I understood and appreciated all of the WordPress plugins. Like I understood like what it did. And so that was like a valuable process to go, or even like more Like going into even more detail, like you were saying, like, oh, let's write a like post, what that would look like. Like that, I think has some value. It has value because it teaches what what the concepts are. Yeah. The hard way.
Right. Chris brought up an example of like how could you build a book or blog site that replaces the functionality of Goodreads, and I think that's really interesting because like that's actually kind of an experimental part of like marking up and consuming right now, and doing a series like Manual Till It Hurts means motivating a lot of these. So it's like I want to make a like. Well, what does that look like? Well, first off, who cares what it looks like unless there's a consuming case? So unless I can like ping Aaron's website and see my face show up, that's actually the goal. And like for something like replacing Goodreads, we don't really have a good consuming case yet. Like each person is showing their own reads, but no one yet is like, what's everybody reading and making that aggregator. And I think the more of these we can come up with simple motivating cases for, like, I want to show up on indiebookshelf.biz. Like,
why is it .biz?
It was. It could have been .horse. I just pulled it out. Pulled it out of my head. Like having more of those, I think, also makes it more plain to people, like why you want to jump onto these things. Because Goodreads has a very clear use case, but like creating read posts for my site is a little more confusing. Like you have to kind of like know exactly what you're trying to get out of it, and then design Goodreads.
Yeah.
Step 3, profit.
So we're at 5 more minutes.
Did we do it? Is that it? 5-minute break.
Yeah, this is great. I'm glad that there's a lot of interest in like extending it this way. Like it's something like I would like. That's one way I could see like with like this stuff. This is something I feel like I can more readily help contribute than like tooling or something like that. Like this is definitely something I would feel, coming from my experience level, like this is something I could help as a community building things. Like that's kind of why it was like brewing in my mind a little bit.
Well, I mean, we talked about like ideas that people are interested in.
Yeah.
Should we lock it down and get some commitments from people? Like I could see us working on these like every other homebrew website club. We take like quiet writing hour. One we do that hour to work on a thing, and next time we try
do
that
the thing. Yeah, totally.
And that would lead to like once a month there's a new like come to our workshop about X.
Until we start building out like a repo of like, hey, there's a bunch of activities we now have. But like for the first while, I think develop it, do it.
Do you want to build in the virtual one? Because for that type of thing, that might work well.
I'm not ready to commit to that, but I do.
No, I'm not talking
really
about committing to it. I'm saying at a possible future date.
Maybe
say if you're doing not a let's get people onto this, where you're going into a concept as a group.
Mm-hmm.
Have that where people could remote in.
Yeah. So Chris Aldridge brought up the idea that like we just say like here's the Google Hangout, join us, and it's like it is when it is because of our timing. But like I see no reason why we couldn't have remote people following along.
Yeah, or even YouTube Live, which we have the channel for.
Yeah, that would also be very nice. Any other thoughts?
So that automatically archives the entire conversation as a future documentation option.
Does anybody have a tutorial that they wish they had right now? Backups?
Oh,
solid.
Yeah.
We're talking about like the boss closing up, but what if you forgot to put on to pay for your pack or something?
Yep.
It's something I'm struggling with, like all the people that I'm kind of brought into the post your own thing and do your own. Then I kind of I feel responsible for their content now.
Yeah.
And maybe they should have been writing to media, right? Fail my job and back that where is it more safe?
Yeah.
So for WordPress, there are plugins, but they depend on like if it's a huge website, a lot of media. PHP depends on resources. So maybe there should be like applications that you can just run them for, or also web services maybe that can access your static site of WordPress and then save it into your cloud.
Yeah, there was a big fad a year or so ago where everyone started pinging the Internet Archive whenever they made a new post, so it would just automatically get backed up by the Wayback Machine, which is like, I'm not sure if anyone considers it a comprehensive strategy, but we all think it's really cool.
Yeah.
Like, it's definitely
not a
there.
horrible idea. Yes, it's inaccurate.
We did not hear from Internet Archive.
I was going to say, what does Brewster Kale think about that?
I think he's good with it. His goal is to back up the whole internet all the time. So
They just got a ton of money, though. Of course, it was in Bitcoin. But, so maybe they got a little money.
they got some money.
It depends.
They got a lot of money. They got a little bit of money. They got a huge amount of money.
Oh, they're broke. Yeah. Yeah.
I certainly have never seen Jason Scott complaining about the amount of
Stuff
being
got-
archived.
That's right. Yeah, his
So-
thing is, if you have to ask, just back it up. It's not for you to decide. Let future generations decide if you should have backed that up.
Yeah, also like Internet Archive will save it. That's a good thing, but it won't help you restore if you have like a
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, not
Yeah.
many people have the reverse tool.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah.
That time? All right.
All right. Awesome.
I'm not going to yell at them. They still have 15 seconds.
Cool.
We can
Let's
start.
all yell at them when it's time.
Okay, you guys ready?
Thanks, everyone.
9, 8,
Jonathan,
7,
you know
6,
where this is going, right?
5,
4. Yeah, I know. It's a good fit. Like, that's what I was thinking. It's like,
Happy New
okay,
Year!
like, this is like what I do
Yeah.
for my job. It's like, I want to leverage the skills I have to like help a community that's awesome that I'm a part of. Like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of what I was thinking.
Well, and I
with
was
some of
totally
that.
like with next book plans.
Absolutely. Like bringing some of this in.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a meetup that we have
We
here.
have one last session.
We do, so we do them, we're not on Meetup. We're not on Meetup.com, but we do them regularly, so we do it twice a month. Tuesdays. So we have a Twitter that we post all of that. Like, yeah, they're here, 6:30 to 8. Yeah, we have it's a homebrew website club. We have a Baltimore homebrew website club. Yeah, because we post the events to that. Oops. Here we go. Homebrew website club. This is the oops, that's the wiki page. It's HWC Baltimore. This is
Okay.
yep. So we post all of our meetings here. So we post the events for it.